Today on the StoryBrand podcast is my friend Jim Kwik. Jim wrote a book called Limitless. He has a new book out called Limitless Daily. He has an incredible story. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how Jim turned his mission into SoundBites that grew the brand. But you're going to hear a whole lot about what he actually teaches. So you're going to get two things: some inspiration on building your own brand based on Jim Kwik, and also you're going to learn a whole lot about how to think better, think faster, and transform yourself using that supercomputer up there in your head that is your brain.
You're listening to the StoryBrand podcast, based on Donald Miller's best-selling book, Building a Story Brand. The StoryBrand framework is made up of 7 key elements, all of them anchored in one powerful idea. Your customer is the hero, and you are their guide. Each week on the podcast, you'll get exactly what you need to craft clear messaging that connects with more customers and grows your business. Now, let's dive in with your host, Donald Miller.
Jim, you got a company called Kwik Learning, is that right? Kwik Learning.
Yeah, Kwik really is my last name. I didn't change it. It's not like a stage name. It's my father's name, my grandfather's name. You could say my life, my destiny was pretty much planned out. Had to be
that was incredibly convenient. If I called it Miller Messaging, I don't think anybody would have bought it. You had the double entendre there was really great. And you started this thing. I didn't realize you've been doing this for, it's 2026 right now. You've been doing this for 25 years.
35. Yeah, I started when I was 18.
So you were, before you started Kwik Learning, you started the company in 2001.
I've been doing this full time since I learned everything, turn my mess into my mission. I'm 53.
You are a young 53, my friend. I would guess 35. That's amazing. Let's talk. You just hijacked the show. We're going to talk about what you're eating, what sort of face cream you use.
Those cold plunges, yeah.
The cold plunges, yeah. We've just been talking for 5 minutes about cold plunges.
I was fortunate enough to find my dharma, my mission pretty early. And,
I want to get into that before we get into the messaging that built your brand. That is literally the offer that you put together, the way you've productized that offer. We're going to get there, and I think there's a lot of stuff for our listeners to learn from that. But before we get there, we got to get into the backstory of the guide. You're the guide who helps the hero. The backstory usually is a backstory of pain, where they experienced a sort of pain that they now want to help people not experience. And yours involved a couple head injuries back in the day, because you help people learn. Let's get that out of the way. You help people learn, and you help people learn things fast. And you claim that everybody tells you you need to learn things. In school, they teach you to learn things, but they don't teach you how to learn. And you are the how to learn guy. So how did this start with pain? Backstory of pain.
Well, my inspiration was my desperation. The quick of it is, pun intended, my parents immigrated here. My dad was 13, had a lot of jobs. 6 of us shared a small bathroom. We lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at.
Wait, your dad was 13 when he came over?
Yeah. He had unfortunately lost both his parents, and they came here to live with aunts and uncles, and just because they couldn't afford to. Everybody has I also want to state this, and I think with challenge comes change. That adversity can become an advantage. But we live in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at. She had many jobs.
She just worked. She didn't own the laundromat. She worked in a laundromat, and you guys lived in the back room.
Yeah.
Where at? What state were you in?
We're in New York.
You were in New York. Okay. Yeah. In the big city?
Just outside the city.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. in the suburb. And it's the core of my story is really, when I was 5 years old, I was in kindergarten class, and I had an unfortunate accident, a traumatic brain injury. I took a very bad fall, went headfirst into a windowsill, ricocheted into a radiator, rushed to the emergency room. I was unconscious.
Knocked out? You were unconscious?
Yeah, it was bad. Where it really showed up was in school. I would have these migraines at 5 years old every single day. I just thought it was normal. I became very shut down. As kids, playful and you're curious, but I became very shut down.
Because you were in pain.
Yeah, I was, and I just didn't. I was trying to understand what was going on. I had poor focus. I couldn't study. Teachers would have to repeat themselves over and over again, single me out, and it just felt different. It took me 3 years longer to learn how to read.
Did
with
you
my
attribute
accident.
that to your head injury, or did you begin to accept an I'm dumb identity?
So the transition was when it took me the 3 years longer to learn how to read. So that affected my self-confidence, my self-worth, certainly. When I was 9 years old, there was an incident where I was being teased in class because a teacher kept on repeating herself, and you could tell it was just for me, right? For me to understand. And I was being teased. I was obviously called slow with last name Kwik and worse things than that. And a teacher came to my defense in third grade. She pointed to me and said, in front of the whole class, and I remember it was like yesterday, Don, she said, leave that kid alone. That's the boy with the broken brain. And I could tell you, even saying those words out loud, all I heard was broken brain, right? And that became, adults have to be very careful of their external words because they often become a child's internal words. So every single time I wasn't picked for sports because I was always the last one because I had coordination, balance issues too. I would say, oh, because I had the broken brain. Every single time I did badly in school, which was every day, I would always say, because I was the broken brain. So while her sentence only took 5 seconds, that was my story for the next 10 years of how broken I was. And
that was 9 through 19 then.
That was 9 till
your entire high school career.
Till I was 18. At the same time, at that age, because my parents were working so much, my grandmother, she was my superhero. She was the one that took care of me. She started showing early signs of Alzheimer's when I was 5. And it's very confusing, when she would call me by my father's name, when she would repeat something she just said, especially for a 5 and 6-year-old. And then she passed of Alzheimer's when I was 7. So even with Limitless, when it came out in 2020, we sold a lot of copies. We donated all the proceeds to charity. We built schools and, for education, for kids that don't have access to education, in Ghana and Guatemala and Kenya. We also provided health care for their families, clean water that kept a lot of the kids out of school. And then also we donate heavily into Alzheimer's research for women because most women are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men. Yet most of the research is done in males. I had no idea. And in memory of my grandmother. But this is everybody has their story. This is mine, and it's interesting. There's a level of grace that's come even now, as I have young kids. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So I started fairly late. But I'm thinking about the stories we tell ourselves in your work, which has helped me so much, over my career. And just the ideas that the stories we tell ourselves is just like your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk, right? It's like your brain is this incredible supercomputer, and that story is like, our self-talk is like the program will run. So if we have a story that we're too old or, I can't remember names, you won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your
literally, it's a confirmation bias at that point.
So much so. And that became, so while the accident was a limitation, certainly I had some learning disabilities that came with it. I actually think the bigger limitation by far was my story about that accident that I told myself. And
the story was, it was given a title or a controlling idea by your teacher.
That label of brokenness became my limit, and so you could say that, and I do believe, she had good intentions,
Oh, sure. She was trying to keep everybody from picking on you, but, but gosh, I mean, that was...
So I struggled. I mean, my 2 biggest challenges were that and my superpower. I talk a lot about superheroes because I couldn't read, and I taught myself how to read by reading comic books. Maybe there was a way for me to escape, just a kind of a challenging childhood, or, and something about the pictures, the art brought the words to life. So I always reference superheroes, and even in Limitless, like, it was based, even the opening opens with like the whole cover and inside cover is Joseph Campbell's, like that, the hero's journey where I want to take people through and make them the hero. And I want to be their Yoda or their Miyagi. And, I found my mentor, when I was 18, I was lucky enough to get into a local university, and I thought a freshman meant you can make a fresh start. So Don, I took all these classes because I wanted to show
Well, hold on. I want to know how you got there, though, because that's a victim mindset being transformed into hero mindset.
Yeah, but
was there somebody or somewhere, or was it a chip on your shoulder? I mean, people ask me like, Don, what's the key to success? And I said, oh, it's so easy. It's a father wound. It's some sort of chip on your shoulder. How did it transform, though, from that victim to something different?
It was like my parents. I give them full credit. Like they're not the healthiest or the wealthiest or the most spiritual or the like that. They don't do yoga or had ever had a green drink. Or probably ever never meditated. But they're and I'm saying like they're just really good. They're just really good people. They work really hard. They're very kind. They do what they say they're going to do. And, so, and they believed, even though that we didn't have a lot of external stuff, I never felt like we lacked, if that makes sense. So I feel like I won the lottery there, and I credit them.
How many siblings again?
I have a younger brother and younger sister. So I also had that pressure of being the oldest in the family to set a good example, but it was hard without a doubt. But I attribute anything that I've done decently well to my parents. Everything I've fallen short of, that's on me, but I like it. So I was lucky, very blessed there. When I was 18 though, I took all these classes because I wanted to make them proud, right? I wanted to show the world, show myself that I could do this. And I did worse, like very worse. And I was ready to quit because I didn't have the money to be in school, and better my brother or sister had it. And because it was not for me, right? And when I had told that to a friend of mine at school, he's like, this is exactly what happened. He said, hey, I'm going home this weekend to visit my family. Why don't you come with me and just get some space, get some perspective before you tell your friends and family you're quitting school? That's a big,
kind
decision. Yeah. And I agree to go, and when I get there, the family's pretty well off, beautiful home on the water, and the father's walking me around the property right before dinner and asked me a very innocent question, but it's the worst question that you could ask me at the time. He's like, so Jim, how's school? Right? Innocent question. Sure. And I just start bawling in front of this complete stranger. Like I'm pretty like stoic and reserved, but I start like, I have so much pent up angst, mentally, emotionally, all this stuff. And I start telling my whole story. Broken brain, you can't cut it in school, I'm ready to quit. And then he asked me a very great question. He's like, well, Jim, what are you doing in school? Like what do you want to be and do and have, contribute? And honestly, Don, I didn't have an answer. No one's ever asked me that question. I just thought you just go to school and you get your job and you this is the path, right? So I start to answer him after some hesitation, and he pauses, he puts his hand out like this, and he takes out a journal out of his back pocket, and he tears out a couple of sheets and hands them to me, and he makes me write these things down. And I don't know how long it took, because it probably took longer than I would acknowledge, but I started writing things. He said, like, if anything was possible, you couldn't fail, like, what would you want to be, do, have, create, contribute? And I started writing down all these things that, and when I'm done, I start folding the sheets of paper to put in my pocket, thinking, okay, this exercise is nice, it's over. And he rips them right out of my hand. And I start freaking out because he starts reading them to himself. And these are things I've never shared with anybody, much less even acknowledged for myself, right? And he's obviously very successful. I'm 18 years old, very insecure. And when he's done, this is what changed my life. He said, Jim, you're this close to everything on this list. And he spreads his index fingers about a foot apart. And I'm thinking, no way. Give me 10 lifetimes and I'm not going to crack that list. And he takes his fingers, he puts them on the side of my head, meaning what's in between is like the key. It's like a movie, right? And then he takes me into his
literally Mr. Miyagi. And then he had you wax his car.
that was coming up. And then he takes me into his home, into a room, Don, that I've never seen before. You'd appreciate it. It's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. Now, remember, I've never read a book, right? Reading's not like it's being in a room full of snakes. I've never seen a library in somebody's home before. But what makes it worse is now I'm in this room full of snakes, and he starts grabbing snakes off the shelf and handing them to me. And I start looking at the titles, and there are these biographies of some incredible men and women in history, and some very early personal growth books. I mean, Napoleon Hill, Norman Vincent Peale, like the classics, right?
I remember
And he
the
says,
power of
Jim,
positive thinking and enthusiasm makes the difference.
all of those, right? And I've never been, like my teacher would have been surprised if I read a book, much less, wrote books. And so he says, Jim, you have to read to succeed. I want you to read one book a week. And automatically I go back to my story. I'm like, have you not listened to anything I was saying? I have this learning challenge. I'm a very bad reader. And he's like, and I said this, I have all this schoolwork, waiting for me. I came in, and when I said schoolwork, he looks at me and said, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. Now, this was 35 years ago, right? So I didn't know it was a Mark Twain quote, but I was like, wow, that's a great saying. And still, I can't commit because my parents taught me anything. It's just, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, but I can't commit to that. Very smart man. He has the audacity. He takes out of his pocket my bucket list, my dream list. And he starts reading every single one of my dreams and goals, my fantasies, out loud, right? And something about like hearing someone who's obviously successful, like incant out into the universe, like someone else's voice, your dreams in somebody else's voice, messed with my mind, my spirit, something fierce. And honestly, Don, a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my parents, things they could never afford, or even if they had money, they wouldn't do for themselves. Right. And with that leverage, because I think things have to go from your head to your heart to your hands. Like we could have goals in our head, but we're not acting consistently with our hands, like taking action. I think a lot of people are missing the emotional part, the heart part, right? The purpose, not intellectual, but feeling that. So I agreed to read one book a week because I want to help my parents. And so fast forward in the story, I'm back at school, sitting at my desk. I have a pile of books I have to read for midterms, a pile of books I promised to read from this mentor, and I already couldn't get through pile A. So where do I get the time? I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't exercise, I don't socialize. I just live in the library for weeks and weeks. And one night at 2:00 in the morning, I pass out of sheer exhaustion. I fall down a flight of stairs in the library, hit my head again. And I woke up 2 full days later in the hospital.
That's a serious fall. This is a second brain injury.
I was hooked up to all these IVs because I was malnourished. I was dehydrated. I was down to 117 pounds. So 50 pounds lighter than I am now. And so I thought I died. And it was the darkest, scariest place because I think part of me wish I did, because that's how worthless I felt. And when I just said there has to be a better way. And when I did, the nurse came in. It's like out of a movie. She brings me a mug of tea because I'm a tea drinker. I don't drink a lot of coffee. And it had a picture of Albert Einstein on it. And the opposite of what I thought I was. But there's this quote on there that we've all heard in different iterations. It said, the same level of thinking that has created your problem won't solve your problem. Mm-hmm. And it made me ask a new question. Like, what's my problem? Well, I have a broken brain. I'm a very slow learner. I was like, well, how do I think differently about that? Well, maybe I could fix my brain. Maybe I could learn how to learn better. And I was like, where do you do that? Well, school teaches you everything. I asked the nurse for a course bulletin for next semester. I started looking at all these classes, and they're all classes on what to learn. Math, history, science, Spanish. 0 classes on how to learn it. So I put my studies aside, and I started studying these personal development books. And I started really getting curious. I wanted to know how my brain works so I could work my brain. How does my memory work so I could work my memory better? And after I started studying this, ancient mnemonics and latest brain science and the art of speed reading, 60 days into it, a light switch flipped on, and I started to understand things for the first time. And I started to get some traction. I started getting better grades. My life improved. And here's how I ended up on this path, though. I couldn't help but help other people because I honestly was very angry. Like, I struggled every day as a kid, and there were simple things that I could have been taught, but I wasn't, that would have helped me, navigate this. And so I started to tutor. And one of my very first students, she was a college freshman. She read 30 books in 30 days, not skim or scan. She read them. And I wanted to know not how. I taught her how to read faster and remember and understand. I want to know why. I'm always curious about what motivates people. And I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer, was given 2 months to live, 60 days by doctors. And the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. In that moment, I said, prayers We said prayers together, wished her luck. 6 months goes by, and I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying profusely. When she stops, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how or why. They're calling it a miracle. But her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And in that moment, I realized two things. I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. And it's a superpower we all have. That's not how smart you are. It's how are you smart. The other thing I learned was my mission, in terms of building better, brighter brains daily, because I find that it's everything,
It
and
is everything.
people are they're struggling and suffering with their focus, their memory, their overload, their distraction, and all these, and their self-esteem, everything. When we weren't given an owner's manual for our minds, every technology, you have instructions on how to use it, but not this one. That's the most important one. So that I made it my mission.
The story is beautiful. It's just amazing, and you see this with so many really successful people. You see this pain, and their pain is so valuable. I can't remember who said it, but never waste a crisis. Have you ever heard that quote? Never waste a crisis.
I like that.
And it is so good. And I find it the number one distinction or the differentiation between very successful people and people who struggle and feel like they are always behind in society. I mean, no judgment against those people. I understand your pain. But I do find the number one differentiation is people who have leveraged their pain for their own success. You call it a chip on your shoulder, call it the empathy that you develop because of pain, and those who continue to be burdened by it. In other words, victim mindset versus what I would call heroic mindset. I don't mean to label those people as heroes, but what I mean is like the people who decide, I was hurt, I'm going to stop other people from being hurt in the way that I was hurt. And I'm going to heal myself, and I'm just determined to get past this. And I just find that that's the difference. And it doesn't matter how intelligent they are. None of that matters. It's literally just your view of the world. And it's often very painful. I have a friend who I care about very much, who I'm watching go down this victim mindset. And I won't get into the specifics, but it's very, very bad. And it's literally just like, hey, if you could just leverage your pain and move it forward. I want to get, we have a bunch of business owners on this podcast. And if you don't mind, you've made so many little great sound bites that are clearly part of your vocabulary and part of your messaging, the system that you've created maybe accidentally. But this podcast is about the message that built the brand. Yeah. Part of that is the same level of thinking that created your problem won't solve your problem, the Einstein quote. At the beginning of a messaging canvas, we have these 5 foundational sound bites that more or less introduce your brand to a customer and invite them into a story in which they use your product or your service in order to change their own lives. And I sort of ran your brand through StoryBrand AI, and I'm very curious of what you would think and respond to these sound bites as I sort of describe the foundational sound bites, whether or not you agree with them or whether or not you've used them or whether or not, Don, that's not exactly how I would say it, but I figure it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I love that.
The problem sound bite, and I just freaking love this, the way it came out, and I think you've used this language on this interview. You were never taught how to learn.
Yeah.
You were just never taught how to learn. As soon as you hear it, you just go, that is absolutely true. It agitates the pain as soon as you hear it. I've never thought about it, but I immediately agree with it.
Yeah, it's like going to somebody, like even your kids or your coworkers, say focus or study this. That's like going to somebody saying play the ukulele or play the didgeridoo, who's never taken a class or any kind of training on how to do that. There's no class called focus. There's no class called remembering, right? And they teach you 3 R's in school: reading, writing, arithmetic. Obviously, spelling's it's not one of them. But what about retention? What about recall? Socrates said learning is remembering. And that's why I like stories a lot, because they're memorable.
Well, they're also great devices on helping you remember things, period. I mean, if you can tell a story about your waitress and, there was a gal who I asked her name, Betsy, and Emmeline and I went out to breakfast, and I'm terrible about remembering names, but I love it when I do, especially if I don't see you in 6 months and I remember your name. People are always shocked. So this woman's name is Rachel. And she looked a little bit like Rachel Weisz, I think is the name of the actress who used to be around. So when she told me her name, I told myself a story about how she hated the fact that Rachel Weisz had stolen her name in order to get her acting career. Total fiction. But now I remember Rachel. And next time I go in there, I go, hi, Rachel, because it's just such an easy story, narrative version to remember. But you teach people these techniques. You teach them in the book Limitless, and also in Limitless Daily, which is a daily devotion which we're going to get to in a second, of little 5-minute reads. Yeah. But you teach people in Limitless these strategies in order to remember and learn things. But each of them solves the problem of you were never taught how to learn. And as soon as I say, you know what, you were never taught how to learn, but there's this thought leader named Jim Kwik, the immediate assumption is Jim Kwik is going to teach me how to learn. Right. It's just so clear. You know what I mean? It's so clear that it allows you to sort of own the category which you clearly own.
Yeah, I think it's important. Our friend Sally Hogshead says that, it's better to be different than to be better. People who create a category, it's kind of like blue ocean strategy. On average, actually, will own 40%. The leader will own 40% of the market. Then it goes to 20 and 10, second and third. But, and that's also important to stand out in the marketplace, right? To be different, to be specific. Do you have a very specific, problem and a transformation you're helping people go through? But yeah, I use these Kwik-isms as kind of as cognitive reframes. I didn't call them Kwik-isms. Our community does that.
Yeah,
but it's like
nice.
it's not how smart you are. It's how are you smart. There's no such thing as a good or bad memory. And people are like, of course there is. No, there's a trained memory and an untrained memory. As your body moves, your brain grooves. Talking about exercise. Yeah. So, there are hundreds of them in Limitless, in our podcast and our courses. But I make them so they're easily shareable, right? They're easy to go viral. They're easy to be able to remember and be able to pass on to other people. It's not how smart you are. It's how are you smart?
And Jim, I want to talk about what we're literally talking about right now is why you are the 60% guy. It's why you own this blue ocean territory and may have even to some degree created it. You were never taught how to learn is so much more memorable, and it's so you feel it when you hear it, where if you would have had the soundbite education matters, nobody would know who Jim Kwik is. Yeah. And you can see how mistakes in messaging are mistakes in building companies and building brands. I mean, you just have to get it right. Yeah. I've got 4 rules of messaging, and you were never taught how to learn obeys rule number 1, 0 cognitive load. I just can't, if I misunderstand you or wonder what you're talking about, the message has failed. The next one is linked to survival. Now, if somebody teaches me how to learn, there's a direct link to my surviving and thriving in life. And it's very obvious. There's a 0 cognitive load connection to the link to survival. It's memorable and repeatable, which is rule number 3. I've read it once and a year later I can say, the exact soundbite. And then it makes the customer the hero. It's clearly describing a hero in a hole who you're going to help out of the hole. And it obeys all 4 rules. Therefore, it works. And it works really, really well.
Yeah, the accelerated learning space, and it's there. I feel like I was able to do it without having a master's in education or a PhD
which is an advantage.
In psychology or a medical degree. I feel like I like researching this. I have a love of learning, but I like making it very accessible with little friction. So if it's understandable, it's kind of even fun to be able to learn and see what we're made of. But I say things like, the faster you learn, the faster you earn. Because knowledge today is not only power, it's profit. And I think people get that, right? The faster you can learn, the faster you can earn. Because knowledge is not only power, it's profit. That when you can easily remember client information or product information, give speeches on stage or on video without notes or a teleprompter, when you can walk into a room with 20 strangers and leave saying goodbye to every single one of them by name, who are they all going to remember, right?
Oh,
These are all things. I also could illustrate the problem people are facing. I'll go on stages and I'll say, get just so people, because I think the more people feel you understand their problem, they feel seen, they felt, then the automatic assumption is the solution. So if I say something like, how many of you have, and I'm talking to a listener right now, how many of you have books on your shelf you haven't read yet? Everyone raised their hands. And it's become shelf-help, not self-help, right? How many of you read a page in a book? These are all the Kwik-isms. How many of you read a page in a book, got to the end, and just forgot what you just read, right? Everybody. Yeah. And you go back and you reread it and you still know what you just read, right? And how many of you, have ever shook someone's hand, got their name, and seconds later, the name just disappears out of your mind, right? So I think when people see that, they could also see consequence. They feel a little bit of pain. Yeah. And I don't think most people realize there's a solution for these things. Like I didn't understand, at your mastermind years ago, where you have a special, we got author friends getting together. I heard someone say something like, you're powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. I think that was Rory or somebody said that. So and I just feel like that's who I'm talking to. Yes. That person
that gets to the second soundbite, which is your empathy soundbite. Once you identify the problem that exists in the market, it is helpful to empathize with those people and do it directly with words, to say, I used to be you. And for you to be able to say, hey, I know exactly what it feels like to be the slowest person in a fast room. That says to me, this guy cares about me. And you're an extremely caring person. I always emphasize that every customer you have is an angel sent from God. Bottom line. And if you see them that way, that there's a mutually beneficial relationship. You're going to help me feed my family, and I'm going to get you out of this hole. Yeah. And so they're just angels from God. But you have a love for these people. It's very obvious. It's where you put your money with the limitless proceeds. But I think it's a superpower of yours.
I do, coming back to, and it's not, this came through, I feel a moral obligation to do what I do, because shame on me if people are struggling or suffering in any way like I was, and I could be supportive and I'm not. And so I feel maybe it's instilled by my parents or something else, from God. I feel like I went through, so there's something called post-traumatic stress, right? But there's also something called post-traumatic growth. And that's where we go through, I'm sure some people listening or watching, they've gone through adversity that they wouldn't wish upon anybody, but they wouldn't change it for themselves, right? Because
Viktor Frankl talks about that. He said, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? Now, if you could take that away, would you? And he said every time he asked that question to a room, the entire room struggles to say they would, because they know there was a benefit.
I just got goosebumps. I literally, I call them truth bumps. I feel like it's that we go through something for a reason, right? And post-traumatic growth is, you wouldn't change it for yourself because you found something. You found a character trait. You found a mission. You found some clarity. You found a strength that you didn't know you had, right? And or something that's bigger than yourself. Like my other challenge besides learning all through school was public speaking, because I never knew the answer. Like my superpower was shrinking, was being invisible, because I don't want to be bullied, so I don't want to be seen. I didn't want to be called out in class. I would always sit in the back behind a tall kid, because I never knew. I would do a book report, because I would work hard, back before the internet. I would spend all the time in the library and everything. But if a teacher asked me to present it in front of the class, I'd be so terrified. Like some people listening might have a fear of public speaking. I had a phobia. Like I would shake. I can't breathe, much less speak. And I would lie. I would say in front of the whole class, to the teacher, that I didn't do it, even if I worked on it for weeks, because I was that terrified. Now, God has a sense of humor, because my two biggest challenges were learning and public speaking. Yeah. And all I do is, public speak on this thing called learning, and I've done it on 60 countries, like 2,200 keynotes for companies and corporations and conferences. But what gets me on those stages or on video is thinking about the person I once was. And, books changed my life, events changed my life. Trainings have changed my life, courses, and I just refuse. Because they always say, I've never taken 5 minutes of public speaking training, but I understand how people learn their best to make it stick and memorable and actionable. But I just feel like, this is why I'm here, and adversity can be an advantage. I don't know one strong person that had an easy life, right? Yeah. Because with challenge comes change, and whoever's listening to this, I think there's a difference between passion and purpose, meaning passion is what lights me up. what lights you up. And everyone listening can think about a lot of things that light them up, that they're passionate about. For me, purpose is taking what lights you up and lighting somebody else up. So like learning is a passion of mine. It wasn't always, but I love to learn. Teaching people how to learn is my purpose because it lights them up. Yes. And I think you learn to earn to return. Right. And so that's always in terms of my tithing and, with church and everything else I do, but it just makes me feel like everything in nature has to grow and also give. And that just feels more aligned because then I don't have to motivate myself because when you're doing something, not just for $1, but for making a difference, I feel like it's more sustainable. For me, when I have to be on 3 continents in a week, for example, when it's still a little bit nervous to be able to do that.
Well, that gets to the answer soundbite, and we're it's the peace soundbite: problem, empathy, answer, change, end result.
Do you ever wonder why some marketing instantly grabs your attention, while other marketing you just ignore? It's not about luck. It's not about a bigger budget. It's that the marketing that works actually follows just a few simple principles that actually makes it easier to understand, makes it memorable, and most important, impossible to overlook. That's why StoryBrand has a free guide, the 4 rules of messaging, that will teach you those principles. In just a few minutes, you'll have a simple framework for evaluating every message you create, from your website and emails to your ads and sales conversations. Download your free copy of those 4 rules today by clicking the link in the show notes.
The answer soundbite is just I'm a brain coach. I teach you to read faster, remember more, and focus on command. I mean, that's my solution to you being in the hole. It's the rope you throw into the hole is, hey, I'm a brain coach. I can get you out of this hole.
It's like someone has a physical trainer to make them more physically fit and strong and faster and more flexible and healthier than I like to be like helping them with their brain.
And then the identity, the change that you offer to that person, the soundbite is you become limitless. It's the name of your book.
I love identity, and I love that you bring that up because I think that's where we're moving towards, right? It's not, people don't need more information. Right. What they need is new habits and a new story and a new identity. I think that people under stress, because everyone could perform well when it's ideal conditions, right? But then when are they ideal, perfect conditions? I feel like under pressure, under stress, that we don't rise to the level of our aspirations. We fall to the level of our stories, our systems, and our self-image.
It's one of your famous quotes.
Yeah, and I feel like you can't outperform your self-image in terms of how you see yourself. And so much of that is driven by the story we're telling ourselves.
Yes.
And that could be a challenge. And then where that story come from, right? Much less the story we're telling to the world, right? That there's an internal reality of what you're offering to people, but then there's this external perception. Right. Some people have a great external perception, but they don't have a great internal reality. But some people have a great internal reality, but they don't have the external perception that matches that, in their community. It doesn't have to be at a big scale, right? It could be in their neighborhood or, in some part of their industry.
I think it's one of the keys to your success. And so much of this is accidental. I don't think you ever intended this. But this was not an option by my guidance counselor. Right, exactly. You think it wasn't part of your business strategy, but you literally want to transform people. It's like, I teach you how to read and I teach you to remember things, but that's not why I do this. I do this because I'm transforming the way you view yourself in this world.
Yeah. In our Slack for our team, like where our communications are, like we start, their prime directive, you start your day with the channel that says Joy Stories, and everyone in social media or customer experience team or whatever, they copy and paste all the stories and they read all their stories before they start work. The presence that these are people, right? These aren't statistics or numbers. These are people whose lives, and that there's nothing that lights me up more than that. Like everything in my life, it's not time management, it's mind management. I think the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, and you're focusing on the most important things. Because I think a lot of people are burnt out, going in their process and work or in life. Not because they're doing too much, but because sometimes we're burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that are lighting us up.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like so many people are dimming their light in an often dark world when we need people because they're dimming their light because they don't want to shine in somebody else's eyes, right? Or their expectations, their opinions, and I just feel like the person in the arena, that Theodore Roosevelt quote has felt like a lot. It's been in my head rent free for a long time, but that just, it's not the critic that counts, right? It's the person in the arena covered in dust and sweat and, and some blood that's going through and failing. But I respect people because, they're doing the work. Because the truth is, wherever age or stage we're at, we can't be upset by the results we didn't get from the work we didn't do, right? And so I feel like part of that is the story we're saying to ourselves of why we can't do something. Because the story is probably accurate, right? I can't do this because I had no money, I had no network, we had no education, we had no contacts or whatever. And it could be all true. And then what, right? So I feel like the most important story.
I mean, you learned this technique that Jim's talking about. I remember having a book on the New York Times for a long time, for very close to a year. Took all the money. I'd paid off my house. I'd put some money away. I sold my house, took the money that I'd put away, and I put it into an investment. It was a movie that I had helped write.
Oh, wow.
And it was a 6-month investment. I was going to get the money back so that I could move to a different house. The house that I wanted to buy fell through, so I just was sitting on all this money. I said, I'm going to put in this investment. That investment, on a Monday morning, I realized I'd lost it all. Every penny. Every penny from a year on the New York Times, every penny of my house money, every penny. I had $5,000. I had just started dating Betsy, and I knew I was going to marry her. Now, I think women are attracted to looks, intelligence, and money. I hate to be that shallow. And I only had one. I had money, and now I had none. So like,
you're a handsome man.
What am I going to do? And I remember crying myself to sleep. And by the way, that part was a joke. Betsy doesn't care what I look like or anything. She actually doesn't care about the money. But I remember about 3 days in saying, okay, here's the story. Here's the story. The story is, because you lost everything, you became extremely wealthy and successful. Now, how does that story become true? And today, Betsy and I give away to charity the same amount of money I lost on that day, at least that much or more. And it's because, I'm convinced it's because I had read enough of Viktor Frankl, read enough of guys like you to understand this story is going to take you down unless you reframe the story, and was able to do that. The end result soundbite for you, I think, is so you can learn any skill in any field for the rest of your life and never be the one falling behind again. Yeah. That's the end of the story if you subscribe to Jim Kwik's, methodologies. Let me do this because I want to make sure our listeners get to the meat of how you built the brand. I want to suggest and find out from you, would this be the controlling idea of your brand? Would this be your tagline? Because AI thinks it could be. If knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. I've heard you say it even on this interview. Would that be the tagline or the controlling idea you think of your brand that built your brand?
I've been saying that for 30 years because I was all, infatuated with superpowers.
Comic book.
I just don't, I think everything is learnable, right? So I feel like it's a core first principle of what we teach is that, you don't take an IQ test when you're 8 and that's your potential when you're 88. We discovered more about the human brain in the past few decades than probably, the first few thousand did. And I feel like we're grossly underestimating our own capabilities.
I think if I could suggest a tagline, I don't think it's better, but AI had one basically, let me teach you how to learn is a really great tagline for Jim Kwik. It's also a really great name of a book. let me just teach you how to learn.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted a tagline for your education material to go into high schools and junior highs and elementary schools, let me teach you how to learn is a really great, because, you've said there's no course on learning. There should be.
No, and they use our systems in some of the top schools in the world, like in South Korea and Finland. The big thing what we're focusing on. I realized I'm asking a question, over the past few years, and where my research has gone into and my coaching has evolved into is that, teaching people how to learn faster and read faster, improve their memory, their focus, optimizing their brain with the best, sleep and, diet protocols and all stress management, all that, habit design. What is it all for? It's really for me to enhance human intelligence. And what I mean by that is another thing that I say besides the art of learning is the art of attention, right? Or I say, more of these, your brain is like a muscle, use it or lose it. It's that my big statement now is human intelligence is greater than artificial intelligence because of this, because there's this thing that's going on. This is why I wrote the new book. There's something called cognitive offloading. And at a meta level, people should be maybe looking at not what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it for their own business or brand or bank account, meaning that I want to own a category. And for me, it's human intelligence, meaning that even when I work with companies like Facebook, Nike, SpaceX, the Air Force, whatever, I feel like the bottleneck for the brand or the business is not necessarily talent or technology or even capital. It's usually the cognitive capacity of the founders or the leaders. Right, their ability to be clear on what's important, what things mean. Because AI could compute and process, but ultimately leaders have to decide, what does this mean? What's important here? What are we going to do with this information? Right? And so AI could scale and amplify, but it only can scale and amplify what a human brings. So if a human being is confused, and uninformed, it'll scale that. But if somebody is, competent, has character, right, is capable, it'll scale that also as well. So my goal is, I believe HI is more important than AI, that everything that I've taught about focus and reading and learning and memory and brain optimization is all to make people more human, like more human intelligence. Because the challenge right now, I'll tell you the big problem that people are going to either feel right now or feel tomorrow is the cognitive offloading. It's the using AI as a crutch, not as a coach.
Yes.
Meaning you wouldn't go to the gym and ask your friends to lift the weights for you. You get no benefit. But AI is removing the friction from the process. And just like building muscles, it requires novelty and nutrition. Same thing with your mental muscles. My big challenge, because everyone listening to this, it's not like the industrial age or the agricultural age where your compensation, your value in society is your brute strength. Today's your brain strength. It's not your muscle power. Today it's your mind power, right? And the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn, because knowledge is only power, it's profit. So I say certain things over and over again for the repetition of it, right? So people can pass it on. But here's what I mean about the AI, and I use AI. I'm a big optimist and utilization, but I always want to prime my mind first. Like I teach in this new book something called B.U.I.L.D. You want to build before you borrow. Talk about SoundBites. Build before you borrow, and it's a simple acronym. I give a lot of acronyms. I mean, you could go online. There are 100 acronyms for remembering names and learning faster and everything, because people are listening and working out or they're driving and they can't write it down and it sticks with them, right? But really quickly, Don, I think this would be a value, for your team, for everyone listening, just as what I'm learning from you is so valuable. The B is in build. Before you borrow, you build your own intelligence, is brainstorm. Before I go to an AI platform, I will brainstorm the situation myself. Right. It's just like if your apartment or office is on the 7th floor, the elevator is a form of technology, but then you don't take the stairs. You don't get the physical workout. If you take an Uber or a car to go 10 blocks to the bank, convenient, but then it could be crippling because we're not getting our steps in. Right. So there's always that balance, but I'm really concerned about it cognitively. And so the industrial age made it easier physically for everybody. The AI age is making it easier cognitively, but that's the problem though, is comfort. There's a comfort crisis, right? That we don't challenge ourselves and we don't get the muscles that come with it. So the B is I brainstorm the situation first. The A, let's go with the U. The U is I'm going to understand the problem. It's attributed to Einstein, who knows, but he said if I have an hour to solve a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes figuring out what the real problem is.
Yeah, I've heard that with Einstein and George Washington both. So
yeah, because often the problem is not the problem. The problem is our attitudes, assumptions about the problem. So I would understand the problem, because I think a lot of people are optimizing for the wrong problem. In life and everything. They have these dominant questions that they're asking themselves, like, why am I not enough? Or, why can't I ever do this? Why does this always happen to me? And they get their answers like they would a prompt on AI. If you went into AI and say, why do I have all this bad luck? It's going to give you all the evidence for it, right? So really defining the problem. And then the I in build is I want to use my imagination. Right? Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge. And what am I imagining? 3 answers to that problem that I've refined myself. I try to come up with it first before I'm spoon-fed. Because again, if AI removes the friction of learning, I'll tell you something I haven't shared. We've done about 500 podcast episodes, and we can't wait to have this conversation with you because I think this could be one of the most important conversations with you as a guest. So my team wanted me to interview somebody that's really known online for their sayings and their insights that they're posting. I was like, that's fine. I do the interview, and I'm really excited about it. I go through all, just like I always do, read all the book, read all the content. And then I got on the conversation, and this person couldn't answer anything with any degree of wisdom. And I really
didn't even know his own book, or didn't.
Yeah, because I think he was spoon-fed the information either through AI or through his team is doing it, and and this person never had to do the work, right? And you could tell the life you live are the lessons you teach. I really think to do what we do, it takes three things for anyone listening. You have to learn your craft, you have to live your craft, and then you've earned the ability to teach it. But I think again, the life you live are the lessons you teach. Like I could roll out of bed like you can at 4 o'clock in the morning and do this because this is what I do to serve. This is what I did to survive, like with the stuff I teach, right? You have to practice what you post because I do believe in this, that humans are very sophisticated. Just like how we could identify AI slop, people could tell if people are really doing the work because it's better well done than well said. It's better, don't promise, prove. Right? Don't say it, show it, right? And so I feel like there's a level of alignment and congruency. So for the I, I'm imagining the answers, 3 answers to this problem. And I also will do these imagination experiments. I'll be like, oh, how would a 5-year-old look at this problem? Because often children will look at it in a totally innocent, non-biased way, right? And see the elusive obvious, or how would somebody 10 times smarter than me solve this problem, right? Or I'll think of a mentor, right? How would they look at this problem? So I'll use my imagination. And then the L in build, after I brainstorm, understand, and imagine solutions myself, then the L is I'll leverage AI. But here's how I use AI. I don't want it to just do the work for me, right? I want to do some of the work so I could maintain. Because what happens in a society where we're cognitively not only offloading, but surrendering? What happens to our muscles, mental muscles of judgment, of creativity, of curiosity, of critical thinking, right? And what happens is how easy is it in a society, a community, a civilization, how easy it would be to manipulate that community when they can't think for themselves or sort through misinformation, or be able to analyze other people's agendas or authority, right? So I think this is paramount, that the big question, if you're talking about story that we're living in right now, is this story. We're living in this conversation with how do you remain deeply human in an age of AI? If AI is to do faster computing, what makes us truly human? And that's what's going to make us valuable. And, I think there are 5 areas for that I think it's not just an AI revolution. I think there can be a human renaissance, an evolution where it'll force us to become more human so because we're not going to compete with AI. Right? But ultimately humans are going to be focusing on certain areas that we talk about in every day in Limitless Daily. But the L is leverage AI, and how I use it is not to do the work for me. What I'm using mostly is I'm saying, give me an argument, a strong argument against what I'm thinking about right now. Or I'm saying I'm asking it to point out my cognitive biases or my blind spots. What could go wrong here? Because AI has an incredible propensity to placate to people, to be a sycophant. It'll talk to the most unintelligent person, make them feel like they're geniuses, right? Because that unless you use it to say, hey, stress test this idea, this business idea,
right? A postmortem, if you will.
Right, exactly. And so that's how I would leverage AI. And then the D in build. After I brainstorm, I have a better understanding of the real problem. I imagine my own solutions, and then I leverage AI to poke holes in it and build on it. And I use it not as an artificial intelligence, more of an augmented intelligence. It's augmenting. It's like all technology is there to help partner, make your life easier. But I don't want it to cripple us, as opposed to where we could build up muscles. And then the D in build is you decide. After all of this, then you decide what's important. What to focus on, what to do with all this information. Because AI also has no stake in anything. The thing with AI, it could spit out all kinds of advice for your relationship, for your health, for your business, but it has no responsibility because it has no consequence, right? Ultimately, human beings have to take on the responsibility, because often with human beings, you see the choices they made, but you don't know you don't know the choices they had, right? And so like ultimately, because AI also has feigned bedside manner, using it as a therapist. I'm not saying don't use that or not, but I'm just saying AI could feign empathy, but it doesn't know how to console a grieving child. It doesn't know what it is like to ask for forgiveness. It doesn't know what it's like to have heartache, right? So like, and that's where wisdom comes from, right? The human experience reflected on. That reflection is really important too, because a lot of people have the same experience, but they have no wisdom because they haven't reflected on, like you have such introspection, right? To be able to go inside and create meaning around like situations or events that have happened. But I always say build before you borrow, and that's another kind of Kwik-ism.
Jim, it's clear that you have used language to build a brand, and I don't think you did it on purpose. I think you did it because you wanted people to understand these concepts, and so you sat down and figured out what is the best way that I can say this, and because of that, you truly, are the leader in the market on how to leverage your brain for the best possible output and the best possible life. I would be amiss to not mention your new book is called Limitless Daily, 366 Keys. By the way, Limitless is, there was a movie. I mean, the movie came out after you. Who was that? Was that Matthew McConaughey? I can't remember who was in.
It was Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper. That's right. That's right. I tend to think they're related, but they're probably not. Limitless Daily, 366 Keys to Train Your Brain, Master Your Mind, and Win Every Day. I've got a copy of the book right here. It is 366 5-minute readings. Last time you and I were together at my house, which was only a couple weeks ago, you said something about the 5 minutes before you go to bed and how important those are. And we usually spend those sitting on our phone.
Yeah.
You've given us something to do with that 5 minutes.
I talk about bookending your day. And at nighttime, I tend to read more fiction reading because I don't want to get in my executive brain. And fiction has been shown to reduce stress upwards of 60%, help you have better sleep quality.
Those people aren't reading Stephen King, I don't think.
Oh, okay. So that might be too stimulating. Well, definitely for me. But but also, by the way, reading fiction can improve your EQ, your empathy, your storytelling, your imagination. Yeah. So many benefits for people who just stick to nonfiction reading. But in the morning, there's something special also besides nighttime where you're kind of embedding, ideas. There's something called sleep inertia. And could be a big takeaway from this conversation that everyone could employ right away tomorrow morning. When you wake up, there's something called sleep inertia. And that's like when you wake up, your computer's rebooting, right? Everything's coming online, right? And all the tabs are closed. So you have focus, your working memory is not full with other people's agenda and everything else. But when you wake up, your focus comes online, your awareness comes online, your alertness comes online. And it's kind of like you're waking up to like snow on the ground, and people haven't run their cars over it or walked over tracks, everything. It's like anything is possible, right? What the science is showing, something called attentional priming, what you put in that early window, and that could be anywhere from the first 15 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on your sleep quality, your circadian rhythm, what stage of sleep you woke up in, like deep sleep or REM sleep. Mm-hmm. So what the science is saying is that window, the mental inputs you choose to allow inside your brain, has a disproportionate effect on the rest of your day. Now, this is
first
huge.
5 minutes. How you're going to frame
the first 15 to 45 minutes is that sleep inertia.
Gotcha.
And so, what it means is this: where does it have a disproportionate influence on the rest of your day, on what you focus on, how you feel, and how you frame the day with your stories. Now, this is really interesting because what I'm saying is, in that first 15 to 45 minutes of sleep inertia, when you have empty, it's like a clear whiteboard. Nobody else has written their stuff on there, your emails, your doom scrolling, whatever else, whatever you choose to put in. And that's why that window is so powerful for prayer, for gratitude, for bonding with a loved one, because that gets magnified in terms of what you focus on. If you do prayer and count your blessings during that window, I guarantee you will see more blessings throughout your day. Because it's called attentional priming, right? Because you're priming your mind before your focus has been put everywhere else. What do most people use that window for, though? They use it for their phone. Yeah. And here's what are you magnifying disproportionately. Comparison, conflict, war, like all the, like nobody would invite 200 strangers into their bedroom first thing in the morning. They talk about whatever they want to talk about. But that's kind of like what people are doing with that window. And so another thing, a Kwik-ism, is I say mind before media. Right? That's why I'm asking people to read Limitless Daily. So it's going to magnify the good things and what they focus on, how they could feel more limitless throughout the day, how they're framing situations either as opportunity or a crisis. And so you want to protect mind before media. I would say intention, set your intention for the day before interruption. Set your direction before distraction. Right. And this is something we all could do. And so I recommend people read, amongst other things that they do in that window, Limitless Daily, to prime their mind to win that day, right? Before the world tells you what's important and what to focus on and what things mean, to kind of get your mind right. And if you want to win the day, I think you have to win that first handful of minutes in the day.
Well, it's a terrific book. It's I actually read today's this morning, and it helped me think about the plans that I keep changing my plan rather than sticking with this one, which was your advice is, hey, what plans do you already have that exist there's still good stuff there and you've walked away from it?
You know what it is, Don? It's meant that, like, because everybody wanted to follow up for Limitless, or they ask how do you.
I was going to ask you that. You chose not to write a follow up.
Yeah, so it's like people wanted to know, but they wanted to know ultimately, this is really great, this 400 pages of an owner's manual for your brain and how to focus and read faster and all that. But how do I practice this daily? And what I wanted to do for multiple reasons is I didn't want to just write another book that people read in a few days and put on the shelf. What I wanted to do is create a new habit. Because first you create your habits, then your habits create you. And also, we had this discussion last time, with the group that we were talking about, that Atlantic article, right? That 16% of people read daily, right? Like a book or a magazine. It's only 16%.
Oh.
51% of people don't read one book a year. And that's tragic, right? And so, part of this is it's an identity shift where if people are reading a little bit each day, for just 5 minutes, 3-minute read, 2-minute exercise, every single day. It's like a mental upgrade. Like you would get the latest version of ChatGPT or the new iPhone or update your Zoom or your apps. This is like a 5-minute upgrade to your mind, right? That controls everything. And it gets them to say, like, what the key is for identity is doing what you say you're going to do. And after reading for a few weeks, people start seeing themselves as, I am a reader. And then they'll start opening up. It's like a gateway to other reading.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, you are such a gift to the world. I just want to summarize for those of you who are building a brand, some things that Jim did right. One, he based his entire service to the world out of his own story. So it was personal. It meant something. It was motivating. He was inspired to do it. He had an extra drive. Second, he defined a problem. I mean, the problem was you were never taught how to learn, and there was a problem that came from his life. He had deep empathy for that problem. He provided a product, Limitless, and we didn't even get into all the apps that you've created that teach people to speed read. We didn't even get into that, but he created solutions, answers to that problem. He offered an identity transformation. He really summed it up in effective tagline, elevator pitch, brand story, and he also just created a campaign around it that we didn't even have time to get to. I mean, live memory demos, your tagline, book title, your Quick Brain podcast, all sorts of speed reading challenges, masterclasses, webinars, stage strategies, all sorts of stuff you did, Jim. You built a wonderful brand. I think it's obvious. Anybody who's listened to this, they're going to be big fans of yours, just like I'm a big fan of yours. You're a gift to the world. I'm thankful. Listen, I'm amazed I didn't even get into this during our interview. I remember thinking I was dumb. I actually think I must have had a low IQ all the way through high school. And I heard a lecture that readers are leaders. And I thought, wait a second, if readers are leaders, then if I read, I could get ahead. And I started with Norman Vincent Peale.
Wow.
And I was just like, the power of positive thinking and enthusiasm makes the difference. Those are the two books. And then I went through a phase where I was trying to read a book a day. I didn't keep up with that, but I probably read 200 books that year. And very similar stories. Didn't have the brain injury that you had, but the way you have leveraged that, healed from that, and gone on to benefit others is absolutely the American dream. And it's an honor to know you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it for everybody here, and thank you for your friendship. And thank you for the support of the book. I mean, it means a lot. It's for me, like building a brand is more a mission.
Yeah.
That happens to also have
the great brands are.
And so, yeah, it's at limitlessdaily.com, and there's some great gifts there. But I just want to, I just wanted to say to you also, just like I think two of the most important stories are the ones that we tell ourselves, and then also the ones we help others believe about themselves. And so I just want to thank you, because you've dedicated your life to helping people communicate with more clarity, more honesty, more hope and help. And in a world that's increasingly noisy and very complicated, I feel like that's an incredible gift. So thank you for being one of those rare people who doesn't just help certainly a business grow, but you help people find and discover that meaning, in their work and their confidence in their message, and that's the legacy work for me.
Thanks, Jim. Limitless Daily is the name of the book. You can get it today on Amazon, wherever you buy books. And then I think I heard you say there's some free gifts at limitlessdaily.com.
Yes.
All right. Oh, go check those out. Jim Kwik, thanks for being on the show today.
You're the best. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the StoryBrand podcast. No matter where you are in your marketing and messaging journey, get the tools, the training, and the support you need to start clarifying that message at StoryBrand.com. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and then leave a comment letting us know what resonated with you and what we can unpack to help your business grow in a future episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.